Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Julie Cullen, and I'm the managing editor of American Nurse Journal, the official journal of the American Nurses Association. Healthcare leaders have been warning for years that U.S. hospitals face a growing nursing shortage. One widely cited study projects a shortfall of 510,394 registered nurses by 2030. The main reasons are varied, but some groups, such as the ANA, point to waves of retiring baby boomer nurses, an aging population requiring more medical care, faculty shortages that limit the capacity of nursing schools to accept more students, and more nurses moving away from direct patient care or leaving healthcare altogether because of stress or burnout. This perfect storm of causes is felt acutely by those charged with the daunting task of nurse staffing and retention. Today, we've convened a panel of nurse leaders and industry experts for this video series to share their recent frontline experiences. We'll explore the best practices they've followed and the creativity and problem solving they've brought to the workforce shortfall. We'll also discuss the technology tools that have empowered them to devise staffing strategies that improve healthcare working conditions while ensuring patient care and mitigating fiscal impacts. Our panelists today are Daniel Bowie, Allison Bruckner, and Brian Dickerson. So let's go ahead and get started, panel. And I want to start with the first question today. This past year has seen some unprecedented developments and distressors in the U.S. healthcare system at large, and the nursing community in particular. So Allison, were there any specific aspects of the hospital IQ enterprise system that came to the forefront for you during the recent staffing pressures, and which did you find specifically or particularly beneficial?
For us here at Mercy One, we really look at that every 4, 6, 8 hours continuously. And the number one thing that helped me really forecast what our needs were for staffing and RN staffing was within Hospital IQ, it tells me a percent staffed. So if I knew we were only 70% staffed for a shift or 80% staffed for a shift, that would help us create the incentives that we utilized to get staff to pick up those shifts and kind of incentivize to fill the needs. That was really the most helpful for me, and really today is still the most helpful as I look forward to holiday season. So Thanksgiving and Christmas, I can project what percent staffed that we're going to be and what incentive shifts we need to offer. And then the dashboards that have been created kind of in my favorite section. They've been excellent to work with so that I can see what those nurse to patient ratios have been over the last 24 to 48 hours and what they're projected to be in the near future so we can adjust staffing. And we've also really looked at that to help us determine which beds we can have open on which departments.
Did you find any of the Hospital IQ Enterprise solutions resulted in better clinical outcomes, improved patient experience and satisfaction?
Most definitely, because we're able to put the right resources in the right place at the right time, so that we are able to protect those nurse to patient ratios and really put the nurses where they're needed so that those patients can receive the care that they need. And it's extremely been beneficial for staff satisfaction also.
We have our sidebar here where we can look at the staff. We give indications on different things about the staff. If they can't do COVID-like duty, who's floating, who's in incentive pay. If you see that little dollar sign there, that's great information. We can look at orientees and see who's in an orientees, and then we can see how many shifts they work, which is extremely important when you're again trying to figure out how do I add my staff when I'm limited staff.
It's helped our productivity, really looking at volumes and trends and where we need to align the staff so that we can also be financially strong. So really it hits all aspects of those experiences.
Allison, I mean, we all know there's been a high rate of turnover recently, and nursing shortages. We've been talking about that. So in what ways has the Hospital IQ Enterprise Staffing Solution impacted the well-being of your frontline nurses within your organization?
We're really taking a different approach this fall than we maybe did a year ago with staffing. And instead of having all the beds open and offering all of those incentive shifts and all of that overtime, we've really found that really has been a hardship on the nurses working 48 to 60 hours a week, because they all want to do, they want to come in and they want to support their teams and they want to help. But, there's really research out there that shows that's not the safest and that's not the best. So trying to protect the nurses, keep those ratios low, not have them in here for all the incentive shifts. We're able to project forward to see how many resources we have the right amount of beds open to do that. And we've really seen a shift in our turnover in the last 30 days. So the turnover was a lot higher than when we've now said, okay, we're really going to protect the nurse, protect their ratios, protect the amount of hours that they're giving to the organization so that they can stay home on the days that they have off and they can rejuvenate, and they're not being called 10 times a day to come and pick up an extra shift. So we've really flipped that thinking in the last 90 days, and we've seen a tremendous impact on our turnover when the nurses have the time they need to rest and recuperate for their next set of shifts.
Danny, is there anything you'd like to add to that from your end?
Another great question and an area of focus for our health system. We use our staffing and scheduling technology to understand how our schedule is being built and maybe consecutive shifts in a row or how many shifts were picked up extra. So with this rollout of our new operating model, our new technology, it allows for us to understand our environment better so that we can support our frontline nurses and ensure that they're getting the breaks. How many shifts are they picking up? What really is a safe environment? So it's something that we're addressing and looking at, and now have the ability to do so, or the visibility that we didn't have before. And it helps us know what targeted approaches can we take to support our frontline staff to ensure that they're well taken care of during this very challenging time, and how they've served our community. We also are looking to serve them. So we have visibility now, and we're working on different programs, well-being programs, et cetera, to help support our frontline staff.
Brian, throughout this conversation, there's been a lot of talk about the essential role of communication in meeting the new normal in staff nursing. In what ways does the Hospital IQ Enterprise Staffing Solution streamline those communications across teams?
Well, it starts with creating an infrastructure that is easier than what they're doing today, because one of the things we know is that we don't want to add more work to nurses, and if we do, they won't use it. They'll prioritize their time for caring for patients, which they should.
First, it allows these notes to go back and forth. By sending notes back and forth, we allow the charge nurses to actually log into the system, and I'm going to simulate that simply by clicking on this list right here. So this is the interface the charge nurse has. So they log into the system. They can look at the list of people that are scheduled to work. They can do quick edits if they need to, or they can just simply add notes here. And you can see here that I added some notes about information needed for sitters and so on. So they can add information about that. And what this does is it creates a layer of transparency. So when I come back here, you can see that I have a number of notes here, and I can click into those. And the really great thing is you can see who read the notes.
So our communication infrastructure really is designed to complement what they need to do. So, and eliminate the chasing of text messages and phone calls, and even the physical rounding out to the units to understand what are the needs. What are the needs, and what are any supply issues as far as anybody that may have called in sick at the last minute or has to leave early. So we built an infrastructure that really is for those hospitals that the charge nurses are part of the staffing process, makes it easy for them to get in, communicate what their needs are, and update any last minute changes really efficiently. So in the case of Danny's organization and other organizations that had centralized staffing, that those staffing people have an accurate picture of what is the supply, where are the shortages, and what are the special needs of the units, so they can make the decisions easily and quickly to deploy staff the best possible way considering the circumstances. Because as you guys know, every day is a new journey. Every day is a new puzzle to put together of how do I need to align my staffing based upon the goals of the organizations, of where the patients are, what they need. And so it needs to be collected quickly, it needs to be efficient, and it needs to be real easy to react to. And I would also add that tracking the history of the communication is very important, where if you have a lot of phone calls, text messages, and even verbal conversations, you lose all that history. By using our infrastructure, you have that ability to go back and replay what happened and sometimes understand where there might be some policy understanding gaps or things that can be clarified so that you're not wasting time on dealing with debates over who gets what staff or whether or not charge nurses are counted towards patient care or not, things like that.
Thanks, Brian. Allison, in your organization, compared to the way communication was done between teams previously, what have those changes meant to the way your organization operates?
For us now, really, it's that real-time communication. And when we change things in the system, so we have central staffing also, and when the staffing clerk puts in a change, it's seen by everybody instantaneously. So there's no more picking up the phone and calling 10 people to tell them that the staffing plan has changed. So really for us, it's that instantaneous, it's that Q4-hour look, it's the fact that we can communicate about the patient's needs and the patient flow planner, and everybody can see that, and it's there for the next day. So it's about that instant communication for us that's been most beneficial.
I would add to that to what Allie said there. We track the communications and the number of communication events entered and the number of reads. And we see in staffing a couple hundred communications a day and thousands of reads. That's thousands of people that have access to know what's going on, the reasons behind staffing. So it really helps with transparency and getting understanding of what's going on.
Brian, is it possible to do pre-planning even in acute mode?
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the things that we find is, quite often we get asked, well, the forecast is just going to tell me I'm short-staffed and I have more patients than I can handle. That is true, but it also will show you where the opportunities, when they do happen, are. And in this world right now, you cannot afford to let one little ounce of nurse time go wasted. So you have to have the systems that let you see when you can, when you have the opportunity. And I think Allie talked about closing beds. And we typically, even in organizations that are short-staffed, can unearth about one extra nurse a shift. And if you think about that, if you're at a 4-to-1 ratio, that could be 4 beds you keep open. And that's care provided, and that's also revenue brought in, that if you're spending the money on that resource already, you should be using properly.
What best practices can equip nurses, staffing leaders to mitigate the impact on patient care in the midst of these critical resource challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think there's a magic bullet for this. Each health system could be experiencing geographical, external environment conditions that are creating what's happening. So, as I look at health systems and how they should be equipping nurse leaders and what best practices we should consider, it's a variety of things. I think that they should be evaluating how they're staffing, scheduling, doing that work. What is their policy? Does it need to be updated? Are they self-scheduling? Is there flexible scheduling opportunities? How are we incentivizing our shifts? Do we have spend laid out, and what's the process in place? Is there technology that we can use to really lean into to automate this work? So I really work with our markets and make sure that we're developing, a tailor-made plan for what their needs are. Is it a new pipeline, right? Do you have academic partnerships? What does your agency need? And do you have that coming in? Do you have a flexible workforce program such as floating? Can we put that in place? So I really just encourage our nurse leaders to evaluate their health system and what's going on, and then look at the things like staffing, scheduling, incentive shifts, how to redesign that, and also your pipeline and what may enhance your pipeline supply. And lastly, we know that our relationship with our leaders is very important. So continuing to build into the nurse manager space and the skills and tools that they need to do their job is essential in building a healthy workforce environment. So making sure they're supported so that they can support their teams is another key thing that we want to promote to help reduce turnover and improve retention in our workforce.
I want to ask each of you to share one or two key recommendations or lessons that you've learned that can better equip our listeners to foster a healthy work culture and that encourages nurse retention and delivers excellent patient care while mitigating the unnecessary labor costs. So let's start with you, Danny.
I often say that this is a journey and there really isn't an end point to workforce management or staffing and scheduling. And so I'd really encourage our frontline nurses to pace themselves. I know that it ebbs and flows, and so we've experienced the ebbs and flows associated with COVID. But I would encourage them to pace themselves, and I would also encourage our profession. I'm a nurse, and I fully believe in our profession and our ability to solve the issues at hand. So we live in it every day. I believe that there's experts in every hospital and health system doing this. And I would challenge my nursing colleagues to think differently and really press into what's happening right now. We've created a bit of a bleak picture, and it does feel bleak, but that doesn't mean that there isn't opportunity ahead of us to do new things and to reevaluate how do we manage our workforce, how do we staff and schedule. So pace yourselves and then think strategically and press into what you have. If there's technology in your health system, press into it and see what you can do to make that work for you. What policies do you have in place? And do those need to be revised to be more contemporary and meeting the needs of your workforce with different flexibility options, et cetera? So I think that there's a gamut of things that we can do. I would just challenge our nursing world and colleagues to do it. And I think the time is now. And I believe that we can solve what we're experiencing and create some new things ahead that will really bring new life and new vision to the profession in the midst of crisis. And lastly, take care of yourself. This has been a challenging time, a lot of work. Find time to recover and rejuvenate your spirit in this time so that we can forge on ahead into the new world and what that looks like.
I echo everything everybody else has said, and the fact that, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting the same outcomes we have today. And we know we need to be nimble and move and change and do things differently. So this is our time, and we need to use that predictive analytics to project where we're going to be in 30, 60, 90 days so that we can make a decision about maybe a care model or a different way to do things, and then stick with it during that time and really study it and see what the outcomes are. We have to be looking ahead, and we're also going to have to learn to work in the new normal. It may not be the same as it was a year or two ago. We talked a lot about agency and travelers really working in our space and having to learn how to align with that, because that's something that's not going to go away in the next 1 to 2 years. It's now a part of our culture. So how do we kind of fold that in and make sure that everybody's needs are met? So really looking ahead and making change. And I too am excited, because I think as nurses, we've always been really great at figuring things out, and we will get through this time and have a much stronger workforce afterwards.
My recommendation, and these two ladies are great examples of this, you can't say you're too busy to change. You have to invest in making a change. Quite often we see things where we'll go into organizations and we'll offer them a no-risk trial of our predictive models, and they'll come back with, we're just too busy right now. And you can't continue to do this, because this isn't going to go away. This isn't going to go away. I think the world has changed. Healthcare has changed. And there's not like, they don't grow nurses on trees. So we have to look at things different. And I would also add that don't look at patient flow and staffing in isolation. We have to look at them together, because having staff, understanding your patient flow priorities can help you figure out where you need to place your staffs in the right place to make sure you get the impacts you need to make sure you don't have downstream bottlenecks and issues, to make sure that there's a bed available for the next patient. And we're starting to even see that staffing offices are asking us to look at not just nurse staffing when we're doing staffing. What's going on with transport? They can be a bottleneck. They can cause an issue in flow. What do we need to do there? What's going on in staffing in the ED? Where do we, are we holding in the ED and we need to dispatch nurses there? And they need to see that picture, and it's expanding. So, look at the new models and don't be afraid to try things.
Thank you, all of you, for your time today and for sharing your insights. We hope that this exchange has provided some pragmatic, actionable steps in these extraordinary times as we strive to optimally staff to best serve patients. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.